Hey everyone, welcome to the Tom's Hardware Podcast for November 16th, 2021. As always, I'm Tom's Hardware Editor-in-Chief Avram Pilch. I am joined by Raspberry Pi expert Ash Hill, Associate Editor Les Pounder, and our very special guest, Josh Lowe, who has been working on some really amazing things to help people learn, especially kids, I think, learn how to program Python. So, Josh, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Josh. I'm a 70-year-old software developer, and for the past 8 years or so, I've been using the Raspberry Pi, and learning how to code and been doing different things. So, yeah, my kind of journey started with always having an interest in computers and how they work. Like from a very young age, I'd often break my parents' laptop and all that kind of stuff. So I was always kind of like interested in how computers work and software, all that kind of stuff. But then in 2012, when the Raspberry Pi came along, I saw this opportunity to get more hands-on with technology and learning how it works. And through a friend that my mum had through work, there was a local event all around the Raspberry Pi called the Raspberry Jam. And Preston, where I'm from in the UK, the first Raspberry Jam was actually originated in Preston. So yeah, it just so happened that I was in the right place at the right time, to learn how the Raspberry Pi works and what you can do with it. So yeah, I kind of just took an interest in going to that event. I've been going in ever since. Obviously, the past year has been virtual, but I've been going along, meeting different people, learn how different things work with the Raspberry Pi and other computers, and just technology in general. It really sparked an interest in coding for me. And basically, I wanted to, pass on that knowledge and interest to other people. So when I started off learning how to code, I used Scratch, which is, the common thing to use for kids to learn how to code. And very quickly, I realized that, I'm going to have to pick up a text-based programming language. And at the time, the most popular one using the Raspberry Pi was Python. And, all of the add-on board and stuff like that used Python. So that was the one that I wanted to pick up, and it was a good language to learn for a first text-based programming language. But I quickly learned that it was, quite difficult making that move from, a visual environment where you can drag and drop blocks, and you've got a stage with a cat that can do different things, and it's very visual and friendly, and you don't really have, room to make errors. It kind of just, you can do what you want and, experiment. I kind of wanted to bring that experience to learning text-based programming languages, through my own experience of finding it a bit difficult and, making that transition between the two, and also seeing it through school when we started learning Python. I wanted to do something about that. So, yeah, I kind of saw a gap to build a tool called Edublocks, which is a platform that I built, which is a drag and drop environment for creating Python programs. So yeah, I've been doing it for the past 5 years now, and yeah, I've just been going ever since of constantly adapting it. So it started off as a program for the Raspberry Pi, where you could basically just use the GPIO pins and nothing really else. But it's quickly expanded into just being able to use standard Python 3 on the web, and also the microbit and circuit Python as well. So yeah, it's really expanded into what was a Saturday afternoon project for me, just having learned text-based programming languages like HTML and a bit of JavaScript as well, being able to put a platform together, to kind of help solve that problem that I found. So yeah, I've been running that for the past 5 years, constantly developing it. And I never expected it to kind of get the uptake that it has. It's being used in 170 countries now, with 75,000 users a month. So yeah, it's kind of really gone further than I ever could have imagined. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it, and it's really made a positive impact around the world on getting kids learning how to code with text-based languages. And that's something that I'm really passionate about. Trying to share the passion and interest that I have with other people.
Yeah, that's really cool. So, what so where would folks go if they want to try your tool? Would they just go to edublocks.org?
Yeah, so it's edublocks.org, and I can actually show you a few things that I've got lined up with what you can do with it. So hopefully if this works, it's a live demo, so it could go wrong, but yeah, here we go. So hopefully you can see that, I think. Might need to zoom out a bit.
Yep, all good.
Resize window. There we go. Yeah. So I've just got Edublocks running on a Raspberry Pi. So the domain name is edublocks.org. And yeah, you basically just go to edublocks.org and you'll get a screen which is very similar to this, and you can choose which mode you want to go into. So I'm actually showing you the new version that's coming out next week, just because it probably makes more sense to do that. But yeah, so basically this is a very simple program which has a few blocks to control something on the Raspberry Pi. So yeah, so you can see that the blocks are actually Python code. So the first block is just a comment, and then under that you've got two imports for the blinked, which is a Promoni add-on board, and then you've got a loop, and you can see that it actually matches the Python code. So like on the right here, you've got a Python view, and the idea behind this is that you still have that text-based environment. You're still learning how the text-based programming language works, but you've got that familiar environment of the blocks that you can drag and drop. So it works very similar to Scratch, where you've got the toolbox on the left, and you can just drag and drop into this workspace on the right here, and that will generate a Python program. So yeah, like I said, you're in this familiar environment of, this is how Scratch works, the dragging and dropping the blocks, but at the same time, you're learning how the Python code works and learning how you'd actually have to type. One of the big problems that I found is that, we're in this world of touchscreen devices, and a lot of kids struggle with a keyboard and mouse, and especially in Python, you've got to be realistic with like the punctuation and capital letters and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, so the idea behind this is that you're still in that familiar environment, but you learn how Python is set out with all the indentation and stuff like that. So if I just move my camera over so you can see and hopefully expand it, and then if I press the run button and hold this up, it should, there you go. So you can see that if I run it again, it just flashes the LEDs on the add-on board here. So yeah, you can do some really cool stuff with GPIO, and Minecraft as well is another thing on the Raspberry Pi. So yeah, you can do some really cool stuff with just a few blocks, but you're also learning that Python language as well, which is really important, if you want to progress, further with coding and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's that. And then if I switch over to here,
so how does it access?
Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah, I have a question for you. How does it access the GPIO from the browser? Does the browser actually have permission to utilize the hardware on the Pi?
Yeah, sorry, I skipped over that bit. So yeah, there's a little server that's running in the background here. So you just run a one line command install to run this, and then you just find it in the menu here. So it's Edublocks Connect, and you just click on that, and then the browser has access to the GPIO pins and Python. So it's all running local on the Raspberry Pi, and it just connects via that server via a WebSocket, so they can talk to each other. So yeah, that's the only thing you need to install to be able to access GPIO.
Can you use this without a Pi? I mean, I'm noticing I go to it on my PC and it allows me, I see I can select a mode, but can I use this on any PC? And what happens if I use it on something that's not a Pi?
Yeah, so if I switch over to this very quickly, yeah, so there's a few other different modes that you can use that aren't Pi specific. So if I just get the right browser window, there we go. So yeah, so this is the Python 3 mode, which is very similar to the Raspberry Pi mode. It's drag and drop, all the same kind of system. But what this allows you to do is run it on any device. This is completely browser based, so you don't have to install anything to run the Python code. So this is just a turtle demo, and then you can run that, and then just scroll over a bit. and you can see that it just runs in the browser. You don't have to install anything. So yeah, originally Edublocks was you had to install it on a Raspberry Pi, but there was a demand for people to use it on iPads, on phones, or just any computer. So this allows people to do that without any hardware, which is important for making it accessible for everyone who might not have access to Raspberry Pis, microbits, that kind of stuff.
Great. Wow. That is just so impressive. So how young of a kids have you found using this?
Yeah, so normally the lower stage is probably 8 years old, but there's no really like age limit for it. It's kind of I don't really like putting an age on it. It's more like if you're feeling able to do it, then give it a go. But yeah, normally 8 years old is kind of like the starting age for people using Edublocks that I've found most commonly.
Yeah, I mean, we got my son into doing some text-based Python programming when he was 7 or 8. So
Yeah.
I could totally see that. Just like you, I really wanted him to learn Python. I wanted him to get out of Scratch because Scratch is not an adult programming language, so there's just a limit as to what you can do. And I wanted him to graduate to adult languages. So I think it's really great what you're doing, giving people that bridge to cross over from kid languages like Scratch to adult language to the adult Python. It's just really awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's all about kind of just making it less scary to go between the two. So yeah, so you got the blocks mode, and if I just switch back to the browser a second, you can also create a new program. So once you're finished with the blocks, you can also put it in text only mode, so you can actually just have access to a normal text-based editor. So you can still use the features of Edublocks with the classroom tools that are all built in for being able to use it in a classroom environment, but you can still use the power and the tools of the program. So there kind of is like the kind of the graduation step of you've got used to the blocks, but you're still using the same program to then make that switch to a text-based Python.
Are you able to import any Python library that you want, or do they have to be specifically made to support Edublocks?
Yeah, so the Python libraries that are built in are basically the kind of like the main popular ones that you select Turtle and stuff like that. But there is if I go into this is the right one. So one of the new features that's coming in the release that's coming out next week is this extension modal here, where you can just provide a GitHub URL and you can actually create your own like Python libraries. So say you've got a library that's not included in Edublocks and you want to include it, you can follow a tutorial of how to build the blocks, which is a really simple thing to do. It's basically just a few lines per block to generate them, and then you give it a Python library, upload that to GitHub, and then people will be able to tap the URL here and add it. But I'm adding new libraries all the time, so that's kind of just a way for if there's a library that you really want and I don't have the time, or it's not really a popular library that's probably worth adding for everyone, that extension functionality will be there for people to add whatever they want. So that's kind of like how it works for now.
Are you working with the major hat makers like Pimoroni and Adafruit?
Not really. It's kind of so the way that Edublocks works is kind of like I'm the lead maintainer of it, but it is an open source GitHub project, so people can contribute to it whenever they want. If they want to read the source code and stuff like that. But I'm not really working directly with Pimoroni or stuff like that. But we've talked to them in the past, and they've been really supportive of the project and stuff. But yeah, for now, there's no like first party kind of libraries or extensions from people who make hats and stuff like that. But the hope is with the extension functionality, which did exist in the current Edublocks, but it's made a bit simpler for people to create the extensions themselves. My hope is with that is that people will, people like Pimoroni and other companies that make add-ons and stuff like that will, create an extension and, let people use it in Edublocks. So that's kind of like the approach that I'm taking with the extensions.
Wow, that is fantastic. So the current version is version 4. Is that correct?
So the current version that's on now is version 3, but the one that's going live is version 4, which is a complete rewrite of the project, and it features a few things that are really helpful, like a built-in classroom tool, so that if you're doing it in a classroom environment, each student can have their own account, and teachers can create an assignment and then submit all the work. Teachers can mark it and then give feedback to the students. So that's kind of like the main feature. But the idea with this new version that's coming out is it's a lot easier to add new features like that. Some more like complex features that educators and users have been asking for. So a few things that I'm looking at adding is support for RP 2040 and so the Pico stuff. So that's something that I want to look at in the future. That's kind of like one of the next things that I'm planning on doing. But yeah, so there's lots of different features that are in this new version next week.
That's awesome. When you support RP 2040, is that going to be MicroPython then?
Yeah, so it's going to be the official MicroPython Raspberry Pi release, and it's going to work over web serial, so you won't actually have to install any special programs or anything like that. You just need a Chrome browser, or I think Edge will probably work as well. So yeah, it just basically connects to the Pico via web serial, and you can just flash it via the browser. So yeah, that's the current plan. I got a prototype working. I just not really got it ready to demo or anything like that. But yeah, that's something that is possible and that I want to add next.
Very cool. Josh, I believe you've got some very famous people in the Python community who like your project. Can you tell us who they are?
Yeah, so we, what was it? 2018, wasn't it? Yeah, so we, me and Les went to PyCon in America, and we managed to meet Guido van Rossum, who is the creator of Python. And we managed to sit down with him for an hour to show him the platform, and yeah, he really liked the idea and the implementation. So yeah, it was really cool to meet him and get his feedback. Obviously, to get feedback and hear that the creator of the language itself really likes the platform is a really good compliment.
Wow, that is amazing. This is an amazing bridge for people. It seems like this is something that almost should maybe come preloaded in Raspberry Pi OS, or at least if you download the full version with all the software, right? I mean,
yeah. So I looked at so the current way to install it is like you basically have to go via GitHub to get a bash script, which isn't the best. I know people probably complain about that, but it's the easiest way to get it working. But the kind of requirement to start that and get it in the apt-get repository is to create an app package. And yeah, it's something I looked into a few years ago, but yeah, I should probably look at that again. Yeah, it would be really nice to have it, included on the, even just in the app repository, not as a included package, which would be even better. But yeah, it's something that I'd like to look at in the future for sure.
Definitely. Josh, what about, I mean, you've probably thought of this already because you're a very smart lad, but what about something like Electron, which is like cross-platform?
Yeah, so that's something that people have asked about before, is like an offline editor, so that you can run it in something like Electron and install it on Windows and stuff like that. Yeah, it's something that I've thought about. Again, it's on my long list of things to do that I don't like to look at often, because there's so many ideas that I'd like to implement that, if only I had enough time to do it. But yeah, an offline mode would be pretty cool. Because I think the biggest one is like places that don't have easy access to internet. Countries where they only have basic computers and they don't have any internet access. But now and again they can download an application to run offline. So I think that's something probably important to look at in the future. But yeah, an offline editor would be pretty cool.
Yeah. So how does one go about creating their own block-based UI? Was there an open source project that like Scratch that you worked from, or did you like completely invent the blocks and the graphics from scratch?
Yeah, so it's so like Scratches and MakeCode and basically all of the block editors have pretty much moved over now. It's Edublocks uses something called Blockly, but it's the forked version of Blockly that Scratch created. So you notice that if you ever used a Blockly editor before, the blocks might look a bit different to Scratch and Edublocks.
Right.
So I'm using the fork that Scratch created with their block design, and that's mainly just because it works better on touch devices because there's a bigger touch target for the blocks, and also for a platform that trying to move people from Scratch to text-based programming, it just kind of makes sense to use that fork. But yeah, it's using Blockly.
Wow. It's just so impressive, this project. It's really amazing. I think everyone,
No, thanks.
including adults, can use it. What is the best way for someone to get started with this? To get started with Edublocks and to learn from it.
Yeah, so if I switch my camera again, and then find the right tab, there we go. Yeah, so if you go into the main interface, so you got the home page, and then you can click on this guides button, and there's built-in tutorials that you can use to create a project in here. So for example, if I click the turtle one and give you a description, press get started, and then so you got this little draggable window, very similar to how Scratch works, and then you can just go through the tutorial and it'll explain like what all the blocks do and talk about the different things that are happening, so that you kind of get a better understanding of what each line does and why that line's there. So yeah, the built-in tutorials are probably the best thing. But if you're using a classroom environment, there's also the curriculum, which Les actually wrote over a year ago now, which actually is so there's 6 lessons with lesson plans and slideshows that teachers can use to deliver a full term's worth of Edublocks lessons. So yeah, this has proven really popular with teachers, and there's lots of great feedback about it just being kind of plug and go, being able to download it, read over it, get familiar with how it works, and then deliver Edublocks in the classroom. So yeah, that kind of make the 2 main ways that I'd suggest getting started.
Wow, fantastic. So you said Les has written some of the tutorials. Who writes the content? Is that mainly, besides Les, is it you? Do you have a team?
Yeah, so it's just me writing the content for now. But again, it's on the project is on GitHub, and anyone can contribute it. There's actually a few tutorials that have been written by community members. Some of the Raspberry Pi ones, like the plant watering project, was written by a community member. But for now, it's mainly just me writing the things alongside community contributors. Yeah.
Wow, that is just absolutely amazing. So Les, what you have a demo to show us with Edublocks, correct?
I do indeed, yes. And I'll just add to what Josh was saying. I finished writing the curriculum guide the week before I joined Tom's Hardware. It was a rapid job to get that done for him. So I've been messing around with the wonderful Edublocks this evening, and I'm messing around with CircuitPython and Edublocks. So I'm going to just switch over to my second camera. So you can see we have a Raspberry Pi Pico, an RP2040. This is in the, which one is it now? It's the Red Robotics Pico to Zero adapter. It was the first one that came out of my box. Great little board. Lets you use hats from the Raspberry Pi on a Pico. And I've got it connected to an LED. You can see as well, I've got some CircuitPython code. And that's how you'd normally see it on the Adafruit's website, how you type it in to say that you're using GPIO pin 14 and it's an output device. And while true, turn it on, wait for a second, turn it off, wait for a second. Easy peasy. But I'm going to show you the blocks for this. It's really cool. The blocks don't look much different to the code, but it's a lot friendlier to look at. So now if I make a mistake, I can take things apart, and it doesn't really matter which way I put them in there for the imports. It just all works. I'm going to have that fear of using text and making a mistake, really. So this code here, what happens is I write the code with the blocks. I say which board, what GPO pin I'm using on the board. I say what output it is. And then I just go to download, and it creates a code.py file. You can't quite see it for the screen, unfortunately. And all I'm doing with that code.py is dragging and dropping it to the Raspberry Pi Pico running CircuitPython. And it resets the board just as CircuitPython does. And away we go. We have a flashing LED. And if I can do this, I can do whatever I want. It's fantastic. It's just simple. So now I've got any PC that I can use. And I've got an old Core i5 2nd gen, which will run Edublocks in a browser. I have a $4 microcontroller. And I have an electronics playset ready to go. And it's all really easy to use.
Wow, that's great. So you're using CircuitPython with Edublocks?
I am, yeah. CircuitPython is one of the supported features of Edublocks. I believe, Josh, it's Raspberry Pi, CircuitPython. What's your ones? You got Python 3?
Yeah, that's right. And also HTML is coming out next week as well.
Brilliant.
Which is kind of like a departure from Python, but it's just another language that people can use, which should be cool to see.
There's another board as well it supports, isn't there? Microbit. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
How could we forget that?
Indeed.
Yes. So some of the folks in the chat, I think this may just be the larger problems that are happening with the internet today, but some of the folks in the chat room are saying that the Edublock website isn't loading.
I just tested it here and it came up, so it might be.
Yeah, me too. So I think it's the intermittent issues that have been happening. Like the tool that we use to broadcast the podcast is called StreamYard, and we had problems earlier today with StreamYard not doing what it should do. So failing, and I think there have been DNS issues around the internet today that are outside of anyone who runs a website's control. So that's my guess. David asks, can you talk about localization and help you could get in translation?
Yeah. So the new Edublocks is currently translated into French. There are a few strings that still need translating, but they'll be sorted by next week. It's still in beta at the minute, so you might find a few things that aren't translated. But yeah, it's basically just a long JSON file with a bunch of strings that people can translate. The idea with that is to put it on a platform. I forget the name of it now, but there's like crowdsourced translation platforms where people can contribute. So the plan is to put it on one of them so that people can contribute to that and hopefully build the bank of languages that people can select from. But quickly going back to the DNS thing, it does use Cloudflare Edublocks, so that's normally the one that goes down. So I imagine if you're having a few issues, that might be related.
I've just checked it on my end, and the URL is absolutely fine for me. I've put the URL in the private chat if anyone wants to pop it on the screen for me. So app.edublocks.org is working fine.
Yeah, it's been working for me also. So I think it's just one of those internet things that happens. So speaking of internet things that happen, Ash, you've been looking into ways that you can more easily control your Pi or use your Pi to control computers from elsewhere.
Yeah, I've been looking at KVM switches, which are little devices you can buy already made, but why not make it on a Pi if you can make it on a Pi, am I right? So if you're not familiar with what they are, KVM stands for Keyboard Video Mouse. And switch obviously indicates we're going to be switching between something. And in this case, a KVM switch lets you use one mouse, one keyboard, and one monitor for multiple machines. You just use the switch to switch between the machines, and the mouse you're using is going to pick up wherever you want it to go. So, as you might have guessed, I've got a Raspberry Pi based application that lets you create one from scratch. And I want to switch my screen over here to show you their website, because they have a really well put together website. You can get to it through pikvm.org, and when you pull it up, if you scroll down, you may notice Tom's hardware tutorial that it links to. I thought it was on the homepage here, but we have a tutorial on Tom's hardware that also goes over how to create a KVM switch. And what I like about this tool is it's totally free, it's totally open source. And a big benefit to using KVM instead of remote desktop is just the ability to control the input at any point in time, whether or not the operating system has even loaded. So if you want to remote into a computer, it needs to be on. It needs to be on the internet. That's the only way you're going to get into it. But if you have a KVM switch, it doesn't even have to be fully booted. You just have to have access to your switch to control the input, so you can adjust BIOS settings and things like that. And of course, it works for multiple Raspberry Pis. You don't just have to use it for desktops. You could, if you have multiple Pis sitting around, you could use this to easily switch between them if you don't feel like swapping over the SD cards. And I think all you need in addition to the Pi to set it up is an HDMI to CSI bridge, and there are a few specific USB cables that you might need depending on how many peripherals you wanted to control. But if you want to check it out and see how it works in detail, go to Tom's Hardware and look up KVM over IP with Raspberry Pi and give this guide a good look through, get an idea of what hardware you need, and if you make one, tell us about it, because I think it's a really useful project if you're into making things on Pis and switching between machines often. What do you guys think? Do you need a KVM? Have you used one before?
I need one. My desk is a mess.
I need one as well.
Yeah, most likely. I mean, I haven't had to do a ton of things remotely, although now that I'm having to go into the office a few days a week and leave my beloved desktop here, maybe I want to KVM that so I can have better control over it for sure. But it's just one of many really cool things folks can do. And the start of it all is really, it's so important to learn Python, and Josh has just provided a really amazing way. So I definitely encourage folks to go to edublocks.org and check it out, install it on your Raspberry Pi. And thank you so much to Josh. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in. We are here every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. UK time, 2:30 p.m. Eastern US time. And you can always find us on YouTube. And we will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.